What's up? My name is Saib and welcome to another episode of this series. And in the previous episode, we've talked about the game loop. We set up our own game loop and our own game state, and we know the difference between both of them and how exactly we can use the game states to change between the game's level or the game scenes. And we know that the game loop is just a bunch of code that deals with all of the things in our game, from drawing to updating to taking inputs to everything. And this is the code from the previous episode. And in today's episode, I thought we're gonna go into physics, but before we actually go into that, I thought maybe I can do an episode for taking inputs like in a good way, because in the previous episode we've been taking inputs like in a random way, the keyboards one and the mouse even. So I thought maybe we can come up with a custom function for dealing with all of these things, and simply by calling this function we can take an input from a user. In our case, we're going to be dealing with the keyboard for now, but later we're going to move on to the mouse and even the touch things. So yeah, let's make a function for the keyboard to actually take inputs from the user, and we can try to move the spaceship using the keyboard's inputs that we take from the user. And this function is gonna be with us until the end of this series. So yeah, it's the most efficient way of taking keyboard inputs from the user, that I personally recommend. So yeah. And okay, so if you don't know exactly how we used to take inputs from the user, you should check the keyboards episode and even the previous 5 episodes. And yeah, but mainly you have to check the keyboards episode to know exactly how we did that, because this is just a build up to what we've been doing in the the previous keyboard episode. So yeah. So the first thing that I'm gonna do is I'm gonna come up with a custom function for this keyboard event function. So I'm gonna call it keyboard for here, and what we're gonna pass into this keyboard is simply the key code. If you don't remember what is the key code, so if I just did this fastly, okay, I'm gonna add an event listener to the window the same way that we used to do it in the previous episode. Now we're gonna use the key down event when we press on any keyboard key, and then I'm gonna make up a function for this key pressed. This is the keyboard event, and I'm gonna console log that one. So log the event to see everything about this event, from the code to the keys to all of the properties of that event. Okay, I have to remove that one simply by removing the source codes like this for the warning. And now if I clicked on any keyboard button on my keyboard, so you're gonna see that it's gonna console log everything about this key from its code like that. That's the keyboard event, and this is the key code that we would be using. So that we're gonna pass this into our function and make things react to this click. So yeah, you should be aware of that key code. You have to be exactly that one. So if I want to use the backspace key, for instance, you're gonna have to click on window backspace. I'm gonna have to use this backspace the way that this is actually written. I hope that makes sense. We've gone through that many times in the previous keyboard episode, and even in the previous episodes, even in the games, I think the 2 games that we've built so far. Yeah. Okay, now to remove that, since we're not gonna use it the old way, it's gonna be a brand new way. And now I'm gonna make a keyboard object which represents all of the properties of this object and all of the methods that can be applied to any keyboard click or keyboard button, for instance. So yeah, the first thing is gonna be the key.code, which is gonna be the key code that I pass. Let me make this one key code like this. So I'm gonna assign the key.code to this key code that we've actually inserted into this function. So now if I'm actually want to use the left one, all I have to do is I'm just gonna make a variable, and I'm gonna call the keyboard, and I'm gonna pass in the key code, which is arrow left. I hope that makes sense. Yeah. Now this is gonna be passed into the key.code, which is simply this key is an object. I told you in the previous episodes to think of objects as standalone entities with like their own properties, their own methods and things. So this is the key.code value that we're gonna compare with the event.code, which is the keyboard event.code, so that we make sure that both of them are exactly the same. We want to click on any particular key. Okay, so now we have the key.code, and now let's make it is down since it's actually clicked or not. So by default it's gonna be not clicked, so is down is gonna be false, sorry. And key is up is gonna be true since we're actually not clicking on that key. By default it's gonna be up, it's not clicked. And key.press to represent everything that we're gonna do when we press on that key. So for now it's gonna be undefined. Undefined is simply just, even if we did this, this is the default value for any variable that you actually define. So if I'm just gonna say like this has the value of undefined. So yeah, and then release. When we release that key, it's gonna be also undefined. And the way I did the key press and release, since we're gonna use that in the acceleration, friction, all of the physics that's gonna come up in the upcoming episode. So this function is gonna be used a lot, even if not just to move or simple movement of the spaceship, but it's gonna be it's done that way so that it can deal with much more than just movement, the simple movement that we've been doing so far. So yeah, I hope that makes sense. Okay, so now we're gonna do two methods that will handle the key down event and the key up event the same way that we've been doing in the previous episode. So for the down handler, which will handle, so if I'm just call the window add event listener, for the key down event, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna specify a down handler which will handle the key down event, and also for the key up, which will be an up handler, so that handles the key up event when we release that key, same as the key pressed and key release that we've used in the keyboard episode. I'm gonna leave a reference to that if you want to check that one, and then come up here to see the differences and how we've actually built on that. So yeah, so now let's define the down handler. This down handler, and it's gonna be, we're gonna equal that to an event which is the keyboard event, and we're gonna give this a definition to see that what exactly is this event. So now if we want to compare that, the event.code is exactly the same as the key code, which means that now this event is gonna be taken from the window on any event, which is that one. Now if we clicked on any key down, this key down has a code that I've showed you before when we console log that one. If I'm clicking on the left arrow, it's gonna be arrow left. So yeah, we have to make sure that both of them are exactly the same, so that we match these two events, so that the things for the left key doesn't happen to the right key. I hope that makes sense. And since I'm gonna be using the down handler, that means the key is actually released, so it's gonna be key dot is up. So this is like an additional condition to make sure that this key is not actually clicked. So it's up, we're gonna click on it, and of course it's gonna be key dot press. And then I'm just gonna call the press like this, since this will actually specify a certain thing that I'm gonna do. This will be specified in the setup function or any other functions, and we can actually refer to that. Now we can change the is down and is up, so now it's actually down, so it's gonna be true, and key is up is gonna be false. Oh yeah, I hope this makes sense. And lastly, what we're gonna do is we're gonna do for the event, and we're gonna say prevent default, same as what we did in the keyboards episode. Sorry, the prevent default will stop the browsers from reacting to this keyboards event, so that if I clicked on the down arrow, it won't scroll down the page. So let's just show you that again, but it's the same as in the keyboards episode. If I increase the height of our canvas like this, you're gonna see now that this is so big, and this is centered by default. And now if I clicked on the arrow down, you can see that the browser reacts to my keyboard event. So by prevent default, it's not gonna react to that. So yeah, it's not just the keyboard, it's gonna be all of the keyboard events, not just the arrow down or anything. Even the copy and paste by Ctrl C and Ctrl P, it's not gonna work. So yeah, let's take it back to 600. Okay, and now we're gonna handle for the up handler, so that handles the key up event. So yeah, let me copy that one. It's gonna be the same, but the difference in here is that we have to make sure that this event matches our key code, and this has to be down. Since I'm actually releasing it, it has to be down before it's released, pressed before it's released. And now it's gonna be release, so that we actually like this, and then it's gonna be false, and this is gonna be true like this, and we have to prevent it false so that nothing is wrong with our key. And lastly, we're gonna return our object so that we can access it in. Yeah, I hope that makes sense. This is the whole implementation of this keyboard function. And lastly, if you're not familiar, if you didn't actually get what this key.press does, now we're gonna specify, since this is undefined, we're gonna give this a value for our use. For instance, I want the left.press to move the spaceship to the left, so I'm gonna give it a different position for the horizontal X, for instance, and then it's gonna be called when we click on that, when we have like a key down, when we click on that keyboard button, which in our case is the left. So yeah, everything will make sense when we actually use it. So now everything is done for the keyboard. Now we can actually use it. So let's specify for some of that. Okay, now we have the velocity in here specified, but for now nothing, it's just given values of zeros. We've talked about the velocity in the previous episode. We're gonna use it in order to displace our object, in our case is the spaceship. So by increasing the X position of this spaceship with the speed, it's gonna be like the this is gonna move it, so that's called the displacement. So we displace this object by increasing the speed to its X position. I hope that makes sense, even in the vertical and horizontal, both of them. And okay, so now let's make the keyboard definition for all of the arrows. So the first one is going to be the left. This is going to be keyboard, and we're going to pass in the arrow left like this. We can use this to make different variables like this. And now for the right, it's going to be keyboard arrow right, and now for the up, it's going to be keyboard and arrow up like this, and for the down, it's going to be keyboard and arrow down. I hope that makes sense. And now we can specify the press and release for each key. So let's say that I want to move my ship when we click on the left arrow. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to click on left. We're going to say on left. So when we click on left, we're going to call press like this and give it a, since this is actually points to something when we call it in the down handler, so this is points to a specific function like this. So yeah, we're defining this function that way. You can write function here, it's fine, it's the same. And yeah, so when we click on the press, what we're gonna do is I'm gonna change the velocity of my spaceship so that it's displaced by the x-axis. So it's gonna be Vx is gonna be -5 since I'm moving to the left, so it's gonna be -5 horizontally, or you can decrease that, it's fine. And then spaceship sprite dot y is gonna be the same, it's gonna be 0. And now let's do for the release, when we actually release my left arrow, and then definition again. Now for the release, I have to make sure that this left was actually for the release, it has to be up since it's actually released. So I'm gonna say if right is down. So when I released my left, I'm not clicking on my right key. I hope that makes sense. This is an additional conditions to make it like a clean code, but so that nothing mixed, so there's no mix up. So if I released my left key, of course my right key is not clicked, so it's gonna stop the ship. I hope that makes sense, so that we actually stop when we release our key from that keyboard click. And of course, I'm not moving in the Y, it's gonna be 0 like this. Let's make it triple equal. That means the triple equal thing is just a comparison between these two values. And if I'm using the double one, it's gonna compare the value, but if I use the triple one, it's gonna compare the value and the type of this variable in here. So since this is actually 0, it's gonna be equally the same. You can use both double equality, it's fine, but just to make sure. And yeah, what I have to do now is simply stop the ship by setting the speed to 0, which will result a zero displacement, so it's not gonna move, it's gonna stop. Now for the Y, all of these other keys exactly work the same. So for that one, what we're gonna do is for the press, if I'm clicking on my right, I'm gonna move my .vx. It's gonna be 5 for instance, and Y, I'm not moving the Y, so it's gonna be 0. And now if I release my right, now I'm just gonna say that the left is not down, it's false, and I'm not moving in Y, which is exactly the same, 0, and simply I'm just gonna stop dot v x equal to 0. So if we try it now for the right and left, but you have to make sure that in the play you update the x position with the velocity so that a displacement happens, and for the Y the same thing, so that this is the actual state of our gameplay for now, the scene. So now if I actually try to do the right and left one, you can see that I'm actually moving. So if I clicked on my left, I press on it, I'm gonna move on my right, sorry, I'm gonna move into the horizontal by 5 until I release my key. And for the release of the Y, in here, we have to make sure if I released my right, the left is not down, which means the left is up, and I'm not moving in the Y axis. So yeah, the same thing goes for the up and down. So let's just copy the things so that we don't have to write everything. So it's gonna be up, and now for the up, I'm not moving horizontally, I'm moving vertically. So it's gonna be -5, since as we all know, as you should know by now, that the Y is inversed. We increase by actually going down, not up. So yeah, if I want to go up, I'm gonna decrease my Y value. And let's say when we release our up, we have to make sure that the down is not clicked, and I'm not moving horizontally like this. And now for the Y, I'm gonna stop, and let's do the last one, which is the down, and the down for here also. This is gonna be +5. We have to make sure that the up button is not clicked, so it's not so it's up, it's not down, and the Vx is 0, and then Vy is actually like this. So now if we try to do this up and down, everything works just fine. By now we can't click 2 buttons together. That's because of our conditions in here, but we can simply change these conditions to make it move diagonally, for instance when we click on 2 buttons. But for now you have to understand the function. Just make sure that you're familiar with all of the press and the release thing. It's really not that hard. If you check the keyboards episode and then you've watched that one, you're gonna see how we built what we've done earlier with this one using this custom function. So yeah, I hope this makes sense. And as I said, this release and press thing is just for the physics, the upcoming physics application, or even episode, or even for many different uses that you're gonna see in the upcoming episodes. So yeah, that's everything in this episode, and I'll see you in the upcoming episodes. And yeah.